In 1967, Jim Morrison and the Doors released a song called People Are Strange. Man, he couldn't have been more on target. People do and don't do things for the darndest of reasons. In a recent management boot camp, an excited group of managers and I worked through some of their various performance issues and how they may be able to take their people by the hand and with their performance flashlight, lead them out of the darkness. All too often, when we have performance issues in our dealerships, managers resort to the nuclear option: fire them. This is a terrible decision and should be the last resort and not the first. The employee churn rate in our dealerships right now is off the charts. I know stores where the service staff joke, we don't even bother to learn the salespeople's names because they're not going to be here that long. This is a terrible situation. Eh, this means all too often our least tenured, least experienced, least trained people are often the first and the last contact with our most precious asset, our customers. High turnover impacts your dealership's image with customers. They think, can't they keep anyone? And it has a detrimental effect on your ability to attract, hire, and retain top talent. Plus, the cost of hiring, training, litigation, it's terrible. Many of you are having record profits, record years, and those profits are being eroded by the costs, some obvious and others not so obvious, of high employee turn rates. When your managers must spend time on finding bodies to replace the ones you just launched or performing the work of those who are departed, they can't focus on driving your dealership's business objectives. Plus, here's what you need to keep in mind: when you fire someone, you lose not one, but three people. Obviously, you lose the person that you fired, but then another person goes under their desk, meaning they don't do anything but try not to get fired. And yet another puts the word out that they're looking for a job. One fascinating and relatively recent development is almost like a dark web of dealership people. You know how after someone gets let go, you see that salesperson walking in the parking lot and talking on their phone? Dollars to Donuts says that person's calling a friend at a local dealership and saying, hey, you guys got any room on your crew? When you must fire someone, they have exceeded your ability to manage them. Consider that for just a moment. They have exceeded your abilities to manage them. Otherwise, you would have been able to correct the discrepancy. I always say, I don't ask for the challenge to be easier. I ask for me to be better. Look, do some people need to go? Of course they do. Violations of federal or state laws, dealership policies, and the knucklehead stuff can't be tolerated. But it should be a last resort and not your first one. One way to be better is to use a model that I learned from legendary instructional thought leader Bob Mager. I had the privilege of meeting Bob early in my career, and he was an interesting character. And he had a great way of sorting out the complexities of the human condition. See, discrepancies are when someone is either not doing what you most wish they were, or they are doing what you most wish they would not. One way that I identify performance discrepancies when working with managers is this. I pose the question, fill in the blanks. I wish blank would blank. To which I get all kinds of interesting responses. I wish Corey would make his customer calls. I wish Steve would train his people. I wish Sarah would do the cycle counts more frequently. Now, the other way that you can look at performance discrepancies is this. I wish blank would not blank. I wish Tyler would not gossip. I wish Andy would not constantly complain. I wish Jessica would not spend so much time on Facebook. Take a moment right now and consider these two questions and jot down some quick responses for your crew. Then you have to ask yourself, is it important? Because not every discrepancy is worth the time to try and sort out. Do you wish someone would keep a neater office, Well, you have to ask yourself, is the current state of their office preventing them from performing their work? Is it reflecting poorly on the dealership? Are customers complaining? If not, it may just be that they aren't keeping their office as neat as you would like them to keep it. That's a you issue, not a real issue. Okay, but let's say it's something like the salesperson isn't making their outbound contacts, and they're not meeting their monthly sales targets. Now you've got yourself a performance discrepancy that's worthy of tackling. Now you have to ask yourself, is it a skill deficiency or is it something else? To determine this, you simply ask yourself, could they do it if their life depended on it? If the answer is no, then you have a skill deficiency. If the answer is yes, now this is where things get interesting. All right, but first things first. Let's say that our pal Corey couldn't make a compelling outbound call if we dangled him by his ankles on top of the Empire State Building. Okay, now you've got yourself a skill deficiency. So now we have to drill down even further. You have to ask yourself, have they ever done it before? Well, if the answer is no, then training is required. Someone needs to transfer the skill of being able to place an outbound call to Corey. By the way, training is the transfer of skill, not the dumping of data. If they have done it before, but aren't doing it or aren't doing it well, you have to ask yourself, well, do they do it often? Because if the answer is no, then you need to arrange for more practice. As a quick aside, this is one of the big differences in the motorcycle business versus the car business. In a busy car store in a metro area, they might be moving 500 cars a month. That's a lot of opportunities to use your sales skills. I know some dealerships that didn't see 5 people last week. In this business, managers need to arrange for daily practice of crucial skills. Now, if they have done it before, do it often, and still stink at it, well, you could try coaching. A one on one sit down in the office while they make their outbound calls, or listening together to recorded calls and finding areas of improvement. But if none of this is working, you could always make their job simpler. How? Well, for example, with outbound calls, you could print out your talking points and post them by the phone. So, you don't have to keep all that stuff in your head. And you could pull up a picture of the customer so, you're looking at them when you're placing the call. And only as a last resort, if they can't do what you're asking them to do, and it's critical for their job, you have to ask yourself, A, is there somewhere else in the store they can work? Or B, is there somewhere else they can work? All right, but let's say that, Corey could make compelling outbound calls. He just doesn't. This is where things get interesting. People do and don't do things for the darndest of reasons. You have to ask yourself, is what we're asking them to do somehow punishing? Now, for example, in this situation, this is often called call reluctance. We don't want to reach out to prospective buyers because we're afraid we'll sound like, one of those robo-callers selling the warranties. Well, you can, which is why you need to get good at having outbound prospective buyer conversations. But it could be something else. I've seen people not place outbound calls because they were, sharing an office with 3 other salespeople, and they didn't want to look silly in front of others. Or in more toxic environments, they didn't want others to hear their approaches, or perhaps steal their customers. There's another reason that salespeople don't make outbound calls. Because no one answers the phone. No one answers the phone anymore. All right, so what's the solution? Well, remove the punishment, remove the pain, change your expectations from outbound calls to outbound customer conversations. Now, whether it's text or email or FaceTime, video chat, Zoom, social media, DM, who cares? What's important is that your sales crew is having meaningful conversations with customers that create trusting relationships, nudging people to do business with you. Then you have to ask yourself, if that's not it, is the non performance somehow rewarding? A sales manager once approached me and said, yeah, I got a guy who's not making his calls. And the problem is that, he's my top performer. Well, now, you're going to have to do some sleuthing. And we did. And guess what was happening? Well, while the rest of the crew was making their calls, this guy was sniping the floor. What was the solution? Hey, we did shifts on calls and floor coverage. All right. The rubric is, you have to inspect what you expect. And we've all heard it, but we don't all do it. The problem is that when people are asked to do something, but that's never followed up on by the manager, people tend to shrug their shoulders and just say to themselves, well, doesn't seem to matter. If you want salespeople to have outbound customer conversations, check on them. If you want salespeople to complete the CRM, check the records. Randomly check the records. If you want the deal jackets complete, you got to check them. You got to inspect what you expect. Of course you do. And then finally, you should really ask yourself, are there obstacles preventing the performance? Do they have the contact information to make the calls? What do you need to do as a manager to enable that performance? If they've got to be a programmer to be able to generate a customer report from your DMS, this could be an issue. Managers need to use all reasonable means to reduce friction to performance. Look, click to call is nice. I like it as much as anybody else, and it's preferable. But if you don't have it, punch the numbers. Being a performance problem solving manager is all about finding the right combination to unlock your people's performance. These ideas can get you further, faster in that realm. But solving human performance issues is a practice. It takes time, experimentation, failure before you have success. Also, here's what I want you to keep in mind. I believe in the concept of positive human intent. I don't believe that anybody gets out of bed in the morning and says to themselves, man, I'm going down to that dealership today and really screw some things up. See, solving performance problems isn't easy, but the rewards of employee loyalty, improved customer satisfaction, reduced cost associated with turnover, very worth it. All right, now go fix something, will you?